child. We're living for this moment and what we have right now. Helping one another find some happiness somehow.
A New Kind of Family. This sitcom began airing in 1979, before taking a hiatus and then airing the rest of the episodes. The premise was that a widowed mother of 3 shares a house with a divorced mother of 1, creating a makeshift family. I mentioned the lost sitcom Apple Pie in episode 2, and it's amazing how this show had such a similar premise, and aired on the same network just 1 year later. It's obvious that they didn't learn from their mistake, because this show met a similar fate to Apple Pie. There actually was a last-ditch effort to save ratings by getting rid of the divorced mother and her daughter, and replacing them with an entirely different family after only 6 episodes. The remaining 5 episodes did not save the show, and it was swiftly cancelled. This show is really only remembered as Rob Lowe's acting debut, as he played one of the widow's sons. And actually, Janet Jackson was the daughter of the new family that got added in the 7th episode. Really though, this was an obscure sitcom that just wasn't liked in its time. As a result of this, all of its episodes are lost. Happening. Happening was a rock and roll variety series from the 1960s. Depending on the year of particular episodes, the show is either called Happening 68 or Happening 69, but just the shortened title Happening refers to the entire thing. The show was hosted by Mark Lindsay and someone whose actual name in the 20th century was Paul Revere. The two of them were actually in a band called Paul Revere and the Raiders, and their band would appear on the show often. Lots of bands would appear on the show, perform new music, and even compete against each other. Notable guests included the Beach Boys, the Monkees, Don Rickles, Dick Clark, whose production company actually produced the show, Frank Sinatra Jr., and Stevie Wonder. As of now, the series only has 12 episodes floating around in circulation, which is a small percentage of the 76 total episodes of the show. Street Fighter NES. The Capcom arcade title Street Fighter was the origin of a fighting game franchise that sold many copies on many platforms. The NES did not get a version of Street Fighter 1, notably, and this is despite an attempt to release it for the console back in 1988. This was known from a sales brochure for Capcom, and despite being listed, the game was never released. It's unknown why this is the case, as not a lot of information has been revealed by those in the know. It seems that even Capcom themselves are aware of this, as the 30th anniversary edition of Street Fighter released in 2018, and contained within was the only known screenshot. This screenshot is the only piece of the NES Street Fighter game available to the public.
Coming August 30th to Cartoon Network. There is great evil in the universe, yet through the darkness, a glimmer of hope shines. A young hero, chosen by fate and lured by adventure, must overcome his doubt and uncover his own greatest power.
Knights of the Zodiac. The Saint Seiya multimedia franchise is sometimes known internationally as the Knights of the Zodiac. The series gained popularity in Europe first before entering English-speaking markets. In the early 2000s, a dub was produced by Dick Entertainment. The dub was known for being low quality and for censorship issues making it a less enjoyable watch. This dub was released in home media in part, but not fully. In 2002, distributor ADV purchased the distribution rights and would plan to release the Dick episodes by selling them to Cartoon Network. ADV actually did produce their own dub of 60 episodes, but that's its own separate thing. 32 of the 40 episodes managed to air on Cartoon Network, whereas the full 40 episodes aired in Canada on YTV. Not a lot of recordings of the missing episodes are out there, as the first 28 episodes that released on DVD are available to watch. Of the remaining episodes, only 2 are available fully in low quality. Avatar: Legends of the Arena. This online fighting game was released for PC in 2008, after the Avatar series had already wrapped up. You play as a character from one of the 4 nations, and the goal was to defeat all of your opponents in the ring in a free-for-all format. The best comparison would be to kinda think of this as a 3D Smash Bros. Gameplay wise, though matches could end by time running out if not all players were knocked out in 5 minutes. A big criticism of the game was its slow load times, but aside from that, players generally enjoyed the gameplay. The server shut down in 2013, and for 7 years the game was basically unplayable in any form. That was until 2020, when, thanks to some dedicated fans, the single-player training mode became accessible again. The main multiplayer functionality of the game is still lost, however. East of the Sun and West of the Moon. The title comes from a Norwegian fairy tale, as this was planned to be an animated adaptation of that fairy tale made by Don Bluth. You probably recognize the name Don Bluth, as he is a legend in the animation industry, known for directing Secret of NIMH and Land Before Time, as well as doing the animation for the innovative arcade games Space Ace and Dragon's Lair. The plot of East of the Sun and West of the Moon was kind of standard to the original fairy tale, with one key difference. The story actually took place in the future, in the year 2500. There were financial issues that kept this film from finishing production, and with the stills we've seen from the film, it looks like it got pretty far into production. But those stills, and only those stills, are what's left. SpongeBob Happiness Squared. The time frame for this lost SpongeBob game is not exactly concrete. It was around sometime in the late 2000s, as it's an early version of what became the Truth or Square video game, which released in 2009. An early trailer came to light after a while, and this showed the original version of what the game could have been before the change in direction. This version was noted for being very similar to Battle for Bikini Bottom, possibly being considered as a direct sequel or at the very least a spiritual successor. Slight other changes to the final game included a different in-game currency and actual fish being enemies instead of robots like the final version had. The game was slated for a fall 2009 release at this point, which is exactly what happened, but the road to get to that point was obviously different. The game was obviously tweaked to promote the Truth or Square episode of SpongeBob that released around the same time. And so the more generic version of the game is only an idea of what could have been, with no playable build ever being publicly available. Mr. Roger. This quick series of shorts were from 1986 UK and were about the titular man trying to get on a subway car, but having something get in his way and prevent him from getting on. Each short was only about 20 seconds in length, and there's believed to be 100 of them produced. These shorts were aired in Europe and Canada, but those are the only known places where they were released. Of the 100 shorts made, only 12 of them are known about at this moment, and only 9 of those 12 are found completely. It's not really clear if there's a path to finding the rest, as a home media release obviously never happened, and finding TV recordings from the 80s is less than reliable. Ruby Dunge. Minecraft was not initially a game that formed out of thin air, but was instead a successor to an early game by Notch, Ruby Dunge. The name comes from a combination of Rubylands and Dungeon, with Rubylands being the name of the world in which this game took place. It's not known what the gameplay would have been like, as many of the in-game details haven't been revealed by Notch, or really anyone that would have inside knowledge, assuming anyone besides Notch does. The game is notable for being a precursor to and inspiring the creation of Minecraft, which is pretty notable. There's some screenshots available, but not much in terms of information, and definitely not a playable version, as if that needed to be said.
Next Sunday, Gary Coleman as you've never seen him before. He's cheered your hearts. Now he's going to touch your hearts in a shocking NBC World movie premiere about a young boy's desperate plea for love and understanding.
I want you to stay out of trouble once and for all. Everything's my fault.
Gary Coleman and Playing with Fire next Sunday.
Playing with Fire. This film aired on NBC in 1985, starring Gary Coleman, who portrays a teenager that struggles with his family life and commits arson. It was criticized for its use of Coleman in a serious role, which contrasted with his most famous role in the sitcom Diff'rent Strokes. This film was actually expected to be a jumping-off point for Coleman to change his image, as contract disputes with NBC would result in the cancellation of Diff'rent Strokes not long after this film came out, and it was actually made while Diff'rent Strokes was on hiatus. Because the film didn't do well, it became obscure and was lost for a long time. And that was its status back when I talked about it in episode 25. Recently it became found by an Internet Archive user, so now viewers can judge for themselves on how it held up. I actually said in episode 25 that someone finding a recording was highly unlikely, and as luck would have it, that's exactly what happened.